billion. Is he worth the money, and who will be the next Detroit athlete to ink a mega deal? The NBA could open a second bubble for teams that didn't qualify for the Orlando bubble. Could the Pistons win the Windy City bubble title and raise a banner? And the Cleveland Indians join Washington's NFL team in considering a change to their team name. But are they being too politically correct? Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube and Facebook Live. This is the Fifth Chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman. He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth Chapter. That's right, and welcome to the Fifth Chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian. We had a little bit of a scare a couple of hours ago, but we are ready for 5 fantastic chapters.
I had a little bit of scare right when I looked down at my monitor and saw my picture looking off to the side. I was like, hey, what's up? But it's good to be here. What's up, man?
Yeah, oops. That was my fault.
That's all right.
Now we're supposed to be on camera.
Scare.
Yes, that's
Sometimes
right.
I'm thinking, hey, how long have I been on camera? What have I been doing? I've just been sitting here. So that's good.
All right, well, want to definitely thank everyone who is tuning in to episode 17, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook Live. And if you are watching it between 8:30 and when we finish the show, make sure that you put in a comment via Facebook Live or YouTube on the side on any of the topics that we discuss, and we might even read your comment during the show. Also want to thank those who are listening to the podcast on Apple, Google, or Spotify. Make sure that you make sure that you subscribe. Like I said, you can participate on the side as well. Let's take a look at today's book. In the second chapter, the NBA may be adding a second bubble for the 8 worst teams. That includes the Pistons. I've got a special name for that bubble. Tell you what that bubble's name would be if it happens in the second chapter. In the third chapter, the Redskins and the Indians are considering changing their team names, but are they just being too politically correct? In the fourth chapter, DeSean Jackson is getting some pretty bad press over the last couple of days after posting some anti-Semitic comments on Instagram. We'll share those with you. And in the fifth chapter, we'll be playing Spartan, Wolverine, or Buckeye. Not exactly Dennis's favorite game, but perhaps as you play along with him, you can beat Dennis and boost your own confidence at home. Dennis, you got to come into it with a better attitude than just thumbs down. I think did you win last time or get close to winning?
I don't think I've won yet, but I'm going to be taking illicit responses from the viewers. So I'm looking forward to that.
Dennis has already admitted that he's going to cheat. All right. Well, talk about a deal that came out of nowhere as we head to the first chapter. Yesterday, without any hint that negotiations were ongoing, just completely out of the blue, the Kansas City Chiefs reached an agreement on a new 10-year contract with Patrick Mahome, a contract extension that starts at the beginning of the 2022 season. It's worth $450 million. That's $45 million per year. That's over $2.8 million per game. Now, if anybody is worthy of the biggest contract in NFL history, it might be Patrick Mahomes, because he's only been in the NFL for 3 years. He's only 24 years old. He already has a regular season MVP. He already has a Super Bowl ring. Dennis, is Mahomes worth every penny? Is this a good deal?
Yeah, I think it's a good deal for both sides. He can actually take it over to $503 million. You know, a lot of that, and with NFL contracts, they always do that. You got to look at that guaranteed money, which, you know, if he gets hurt next year, it ends up being 141 guaranteed.
Oh, no.
Yeah, right. But you know what? He's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's an amazing deal. It's an amazing deal for if you're a Chiefs fan, thinking that you're going to have the guy for the next 10 years. And you know what? there's guys in sports that transcend the game, and he's one of them. Steph Curry, a couple of years ago in basketball, was shooting threes from not just 3-point land. He was shooting it from like just over half court and draining them. You see what the effect that has had on the league. Actually, the Warriors together, the Splash Brothers, the volume threes that they're shooting, they've totally changed the game. And then Mahomes, it wasn't so long ago that we were talking about, you need to have your feet set and throw on the right plane. And Mahomes is out there freelancing, no looking, and he is just, he's transcended the game. And he cashed in on a Super Bowl this year. Could have won one last year. He was in a dogfight with the Patriots in that game. So and if it wasn't for an offsides call, he'd have been there looking for 2 in a row. But yeah, awesome player, and if there's anybody that's worth $45+ billion a year, it's Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback that you would create if you could start from scratch and design one on Madden or something like that. He's accurate. He makes good decisions. He hardly ever throws interceptions. I think he only had 5 or 6 last year. You were talking about how in the quarterback textbook, you would say you have to set your feet, and he's making off-balance throws. He's throwing across his body. He'll be running to the right sideline, throwing across his body over the middle of the field. Any old school or any new school quarterback coach would say, don't do that. That's a recipe for throwing an interception. He does it anyway. He does it with accuracy. He does it with power, with pace, so that he gets there in a short period of time. And he throws them for touchdown passes. He throws good deep balls, and he's one of the best running quarterbacks in the league. He's not just a guy that scrambles to buy more time. If you need him to get out of the pocket and then run for 30 yards or run for 15 yards to get a first down on 3rd and 11, he can do all that. He's clutch, as we saw in the playoffs last year. So if there was any quarterback, any player in the NFL that was worthy of the biggest contract, the $45 million per year contract, it would be Mahomes. It's hard, though, to wrap your mind around $450 million because over 10 years, that's like winning a $45 million Mega Millions jackpot every year for a decade. I'm concerned about the length of the deal. I get that if he gets hurt, it's only $140 million, and if he's healthy the whole time, and he's been healthy throughout his career, his 3-year career, then the second half of the contract is going to look pretty good because while $45 million is a lot, these numbers keep going up. We thought that $27 million a year for Stafford was a lot, and now you got Mahomes making 60 or 70% more than that. So the second half of the contract could turn out to be a bargain for Kansas City. But here in Detroit, you think about 10, 12-year deals, and you think about Miguel Cabrera. What if he regresses, and how are you going to pay all of his teammates? So I get right now it looks really good. It's certainly better to pay him as a 24-year-old than a 27 or 28-year-old. But I do wonder about the latter half of that contract.
Yeah, the one thing, he did miss a couple games this year. He got rolled up on that Thursday night game. But you know what? This takes it to 12 years. He's 24, so 36 years old. The way quarterbacks are playing right now, if this took him, where you're thinking about in his upper 30s, I would be a little bit more worried about it. I always looked at baseball contracts, you just cut them in half, and you're always just paying for the, the first half of those deals, and those second half ones, you just got to hold your nose. And in football, once you get that guaranteed money, you can just cut a guy anyway. So that's the one thing about it. Like Mike Trout's got his deal. The Angels and Miggy's got his deal. The Tigers just can't cut him. Like for Mahomes, they get into, he's 32, 33 years old, and, they don't like how he's playing. They can just move on and they can cut him there. So that's the one thing, the advantage about the NFL. But, you mentioned the playoffs and how he performed. Last year, he was amazing. They were down big time in those games. And just to see him calmly bring them back with just the most amazing performances. I mean, now was really the time to strike, man. The iron was hot, and he couldn't have been any hotter. So, it's a good deal all the way around, man. He transcends football, and he's a superstar in all of sports. I mean, football's the king of all sports. But man, he's sitting on top of everybody.
Yeah, if I was a kid right now and I was in the backyard playing football or playing catch with one of my friends or with my dad or something like that, I would want to imitate Patrick Mahomes. That's what I'd be doing. When I was a kid, I did the same thing. I would imitate the Desmond Howard diving catch, or I would imitate, I don't know, Barry Sanders with the juke moves. If I was a kid in 2020, 10, 11, 12 years old, I'd be running around the backyard, throwing off my back foot across the field, trying to hit somebody on target. And that's exactly what you talk about when it comes to transcending the position. But when you get $450 million, you need to do more than just transcend the position. You've got to have some extremely high expectations, and you've got to meet those expectations. Think about when Matt Stafford signed that gigantic contract to become the highest paid player in NFL history. There were a lot of slappies who praised the deal. I was not a slappy, therefore I didn't praise the deal. I thought it was a dumb deal because A, he wasn't one of the best players in the NFL. He had been a one-time Pro Bowler at that time. And B, he didn't lead the team to any team success, like, for instance, you could say with Joe Flacco when he had 11 touchdowns, no picks to lead the Falcons to a Super Bowl. When you have the biggest contract in league history, then you need to have individual and team expectations. Stafford has been a one or two-time Pro Bowler. It's fair to expect him, though, to be a Pro Bowler every year with the contract that he signed. It was fair for people to say that Stafford, with the biggest contract, needed to have his team in the playoffs just about every year and have a division championship just about every year. It's also fair to say that he should have taken the Lions to at least a Super Bowl championship. He's done none of that. For Patrick Mahomes, getting an even bigger deal over the next 12 years, you got to say, well, you got to make the Pro Bowl at least 10 times. You've got to have at least 4 more MVPs. You got to have at least 8 more division championships and at least 3 more Super Bowl championships. Or else, what's the point of paying you $45 million a year?
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty lofty goals that you put on there. I thought multiple Super Bowls, though, over the next 5 years. So I'm not so far behind you, and I think he can reach all of those goals. As for Stafford, most teams, I think every other general manager in the NFL would have paid him. You could say that doesn't mean, that they're right.
They're stupid, but, yes.
Well, I do think that, you look at Andy Reid and the Kansas City organization, they had a 32-year-old quarterback who almost took his team to the Super Bowl and was a Pro Bowler, was coming off a pretty good year, actually had won a playoff game. And they drafted Mahomes anyways when their whole franchise was screaming like, we just need defense. We've got everything here. They went out and they drafted Mahomes when they had Alex Smith already. And the Lions, a very similar situation. Except the Lions were drafting a lot higher. And that's why early on I was for taking Tua Tagovailoa at number 3 for the Lions there. It's like, you only get an opportunity to draft guys that and you know what, Mahomes wasn't looked at as this transcendent player when the Chiefs moved up to take him, but Tua was. So that was the comparison
that
I was
healthy.
Thinking about if he was healthy. And then in the end, he didn't run, so the Lions had to come off. The Lions were trapped, and so it's kind of the plight of being in the Lions organization. You get a chance, you get up that high, then you have a pandemic, you can't work the guy out, and he doesn't run, and they'd have been damned if they would have taken him because, a guy with a broken hip, likely, you just feel like that if you're a Lion fan. If they'd have taken Tua, he would have never played, would have always had that hip, and, now he's going to be, the next Dan Marino down there for the Dolphins.
I don't think that Tua is going to be playing into his 30s just because of that hip injury. If you look at what happened with Dennis Pitta, he had almost the same injury. Not only did he dislocate his hip, but he also fractured the hip bone or whatever, the hip socket, whatever you want to call it. And in the next 4 years, he re-injured his hip twice, and he's been out of football ever since then. So I don't have any confidence that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be a player that Lions fans miss. But when you talk about what the Chiefs did, they had a respectable quarterback in Alex Smith and replaced him. The Lions have a respectable quarterback. Potentially, they could replace him, maybe not with Trevor Lawrence because people expect him to be number 1, although with Matt Patricia, I mean, there's no bar too low. He's got the biggest losing streak in the NFL at 9 right now. Perhaps Justin Fields falls to the Lions next year at 2 or 3 or 4. Or maybe the Lions finish with the 10th worst record and they trade up to get him, and they could have their own Patrick Mahomes type of replacement. And and do what the Chiefs did.
Remember this? I just was listening to Daniel Jeremiah over the last couple of weeks, and he was talking about Fields and Lawrence, and he put where did Carson Wentz go? North Dakota State.
Yes.
The quarterback
like
at
that.
North Dakota State right now, he thinks is better than Lawrence and Fields. So, just one of those guys to keep on the radar there. It's the early going. Heck, we don't even know if we're going to play football, but some praise being set the way of the North Dakota State quarterback, so much so that he could, be in play for the number 1 pick next year.
Well, let's bring this $450 million contract local, because we don't. When you look at the 4 major sports teams in town, Pistons, Lions, Red Wings, Tigers, there clearly doesn't appear to be anybody that's on pace to get a $450 million contract in the next calendar year. But when you look at these teams, all with losing records, do you see anybody that in the next few years could get a $100 million year contract, or perhaps could be one of the top 5 paid players in their league?
Yeah, I don't really see anybody with the Lions, unless the Lions are going to give Matt Stafford some kind of an extension, which, could always happen. So, he would be one. I don't think Sekou, I guess he could take off, or whoever the Pistons, if they landed the number 1 pick, or whoever they got, if they were in the top 5. We'll get to them in a minute. Maybe, if this guy ends up being a superstar, but every team could say that, if they pick somebody. The Wings, I don't see that. So it's got to be somebody from the Tigers, and they got a lot of top talent there that, if one of those guys pop, from Riley Green to Torkelson to Manning to Mize, I'd put Scooble in there. I would put those as the top 5 guys. I would give you the field if you give me those 5 guys. And how about we make that bet?
No, because I would take one of those 5 guys as well. I mean, You look at the Pistons. Even though I think that Christian Wood's going to get a much bigger contract than you do, I don't think he's going to get. Bet. Yeah, I don't think he's going to. I don't think we made a bet, but we've discussed it.
We should.
He's not going to get $100 million. He's not going to be getting $25 million a year, but he's a lock to get over $10 million a year, absolutely. And he's most likely going to get over $15 million a year, but that's not going to put him in elite money. You look at the Red Wings; they're the worst franchise in all sports. No reason to discuss them. The Tigers; they don't have anybody that's played a major league game that's in consideration. And that's the one drawback about Mize, Manning, Scooble, Torkelson, and Green, is that it takes so long to hit free agency. We do see that if you are just a truly transcendent player, that after 2 years or maybe 3 years in your major league career, they'll give you a big time extension so that they won't have to deal with arbitration and to take you into your first couple of years of free agency. That's where a guy like Torkelson or a pitcher like Manning or Mize or Scooble, if they get into the top 5 of the Cy Young race in 2021, could be on pace by 2023 to sign themselves a $150 million deal. I think that if there's one guy who could in the next year not be top 5 in the league, but top 5 at his position, you'd have to look at Kenny Galladay. If they were to give him an extension right now, I don't think that he'd be top 5 in the league, because I was looking at the numbers and I saw that Tyreek Hill and Odell Beckham Jr. are tied for 5th at $18 million a year. Backing into the Pro Bowl 1 year is not my recipe for being a top 5 paid wide receiver, even if you're still in your rookie contract. But if he has another Pro Bowl year in 2020 and he doesn't back in, then I think he could get top 5 wide receiver money in the NFL. I think the next 100. Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that was a good point. Go ahead.
Well, and as far as the next $100 million contract, the one other name I would put in there besides the 5 Tigers who have never played a Tigers game is the player that the Pistons draft this year. If they draft LaMelo Ball, if they draft Evgeny Hechavarria, or whatever his name is, if they draft one of these guys and they become the rookie of the year, and then in a couple of years they sign him to a big-time extension, then, I mean, we could be talking about $150, $180 million.
Yeah, hopefully it's Anthony Edwards.
Oh, if he's that good, I'll take it. Pistons need help everywhere.
Well, speaking of the Pistons, chap, we go to the second chapter, and we all know about that Orlando bubble. Some of the players have seen some pictures of them making their way down to Orlando to get ready for the playoffs, or I guess it's the rest of the regular season, then the playoffs down there in Florida. But the Pistons are not one of those teams, but there is a second bubble that has been discussed, and it's going to be in the Windy City in Chicago for teams that were left out. The 8 teams that were left out. What do you think of the second bubble and the Pistons being included there?
Well, what I think about the second bubble and the Pistons possibly being included is that the best thing about a second bubble is that it would have the perfect presenting sponsor. You could call it the toilet scrubbing bubble, and here is the promo video they could put out.
At the Scrubbing Bubbles Toilet Division, scrubologists discovered the only thing worse than a dirty toilet is a dirty clip-on. Ew! Introducing Scrubbing Bubbles Toilet Cleaning Gel. Just stamp it in your bowl. It cleans and freshens for a whole week and dissolves away. So you never have to... Again. New Scrubbing Bubbles Toilet Cleaning Gel. The freshest way to keep a toilet clean. S.C. Johnson, a family company.
That was my first thought when I heard about the Chicago bubble. People were talking about the toilet bowl. People were talking about it's a bubble. It's the toilet scrubbing bubble. Because you're talking about 8 teams that didn't even, not only were they not good enough to make the playoffs, they weren't even good enough to be considered on the actual bubble to make the playoffs. And then they're going to have some sort of like weird workout where they can play scrimmages against each other. There's no reason to have a toilet scrubbing bubble for a toilet scrubbing bubble championship. You know, presented by Dow. Are they going to get a championship that looks like the toilet scrubbing bubble product that they showed right there with the scrubbing bubble logo there? It wouldn't make any money because it would cost, number one, it would cost a lot of money to set up a bubble. They're investing a lot of money in Orlando to have a real bubble. Now, obviously, you're talking about a third of the teams, but to separate people in Chicago from the rest of the world, that's going to take a lot of money, booking all these hotel rooms. You're not going to get a national TV contract. Even if they have some sort of championship, nobody's going to watch if there's nothing on the line. Fans are not going to watch on their local TV networks to see them play 4 to 8 games when they played so poorly for 60-plus games. It would be a joke. There was a comment that was made by Dwayne Casey, Pistons head coach, that I found in this ESPN article. And I'll put the article up on the screen so that everybody can see it. And in the article, he says that he polled some other NBA coaches that were going to be, I guess, participating in this potential toilet scrubbing bubble. And where'd this article go? Basically, nobody was in favor of it. And
yeah, you know what, Chap? Well, you look for that. There
yeah.
you go. There you go.
Here we go. Pistons coach Dwayne Casey said he took an informal poll among the coaches who are not in Orlando, and he says the majority of them prefer holding their own camps. We'd rather do that than go to the bubble because unlike those teams in Orlando, we wouldn't be playing for the same reason. The reason we want these mini camps is to get our team together, to have the camaraderie, to improve and enjoy some competition. We feel we can do that safely in our own environment. We can't let these guys sit around from March 11th to December without doing something. So that makes sense. Sitting around for 9 months not doing anything, you don't want that. But they're not going to be playing anything. So don't bring 8 teams together to have them play for absolutely nothing. The toilet scrubbing bubble's a joke.
Yeah, it is. I mean, back when I used to play in Gus Macker's, you get a toilet bowl trophy, and it was a real consolation prize. It was a funny looking trophy. It had a toilet on the actual trophy, but nobody was lifting it over their head and running around like it was the Stanley Cup. You know what? It's probably a bad idea to play all of these, but we know how much money is at stake, and so that's why they're doing it. In this situation, you can still have some structure with your guys and have them scrimmage. If you wanted to fly another team in, maybe you could do something like that. But if the games aren't going to count, and we don't want the games to count, having a toilet bowl in Chicago where everybody is trying to lose games rather than win it, that's some real structure there. It's like if you would win a game, you actually get it in the loss column. Maybe that would be exciting. like, we know that at some point, like, the money and the safety and all that, all these things are being balanced by all sports leagues. But this is a bad idea. I don't think it's going to, it's been talked about. And I just think that we realize that, this one, you pull the plug on. Just stay where you're at. Nobody wants to be there. None of the fans want to watch it. Like, I mean, come on. Like, the one thing, like, there's all these different positive tests when you're seeing all across sports. What happens when you go to the bubble and they test everybody, and then that's when we're really going to watch for the positive tests, and to have a second bubble included in that, nobody's in favor of it.
For a bunch of losers. Now, I was thinking really hard. Is there any way that this could work? Is there any way they could draw some attention? Is there any way that they could provide some meeting? And I did find one way, and by find, I mean I found it right here in my brain. In the head is the brain. This would get me to watch, because they're obvious. I mean, saying you're going to play for a toilet scrubbing bowl championship or scrubbing bubble championship and hanging a banner is not going to excite these players, and a lot of players are going to sit out, and you'll just have a whole bunch of Sekou Doumbouya G League highlights. But here's my solution. You play 4 warm-up games in the Chicago toilet scrubbing bubble, and then you play either a best of 3 or a one-and-done tournament with the final 8 teams like you have in the NCAA tournament, and you're asking yourself right now, well, what's on the line? Who cares if you win the toilet scrubbing bubble championship? The winning team gets a 20...
Gets the number 1 pick? Nope.
I wasn't going to say that, but close. The winner gets a 20% boost to their lottery odds. So you look at the Pistons, they have a 10.5% chance at the number 1 pick. All of a sudden, they get a 30.5% chance at the number 1 pick. They have a 42% chance at a top 4 pick. All of a sudden, they've got a 62% chance at a top 4 pick. I think that would make things exciting. I think that would obviously get players to want to win. You would look at teams like the Warriors, where they've had injuries all year, and if they had a Chicago scrubbing bubble championship, then they wouldn't play. But if they found out that they would have a better chance to get in the number 1 pick, and they'd only be playing, 10 games or something like that, then maybe Curry, Thompson, Green would come back for that. You could get Trae Young trying to go off for 50 points in the semifinals against Andre Drummond and the Cavs. If they're fighting for the number 1 pick, that might do it. I would watch.
Yeah, maybe. Remember what Jordan said when they were thinking about doing like the soccer cup type round robin for the NBA playoffs? Yeah. He stepped in and said they want to do things as normal as possible. So as much as you can, even when you're talking about bubbles. But when you're coming up to a second bubble, and now you're starting to talk about NCAA style and boosting your lottery odds, I mean, it's all a bad idea. The second bubble's all a bad idea. So I'll be amazed if they end up getting it close to coming off.
There would be interest, though, from the teams that stunk, because right now you got 22 markets around the country that are interested in the NBA bubble returning, because they want to see, even if it's just for the 4 games and then their team doesn't make the playoffs, they want to see their team fight for the playoffs, or if they're a team like the Bucks or a team like the Celtics, fight for positioning. The bottom 8 teams, once the season is over, they got nothing to fight for. But if you are a fan of the Knicks, of the Pistons, of the Cavs, all you're thinking about for the last 3 months of the season was, how can we tank like a no-limit soldier to get ourselves a top pick? And now you have a chance to better those odds while winning at the same time. There'd be a reason for Pistons fans to want to see Griffin and Rose play, because they say, we want LaMelo Ball, get in there and play 10 games. Get in there and play 8 games.
Gosh. I'm going thumbs down again.
Oh my gosh, Dennis is not buying my idea.
We'll see what kind of feedback you're getting on this. They like the classic Michigan Panther shirt. That's from Sideshow Raj. The feedback coming in on YouTube. Keith says he doesn't care what either of us say. Tua's going to be a star. And then he's breaking down the money for Mahomes. $1.60 per second, $96 per minute, $5,742 per hour, and $137,000 per day. Holy Toledo. I don't know if he's talking about Mahomes or if he was talking about Cabrera.
I think he was talking about Cabrera. I was actually thinking about Patrick Mahomes' money as well. Think about it like this. If he's getting $2.8 million per game, if you graduate high school at age 18, you don't go to college, you start working at 18, you work for 50 years, and you retire at age 68. A lot of people do that in this country. Let's say you made $56,000 per year. That's a decent income. You will make less over that 50-year span than Mahomes will make during his first regular season game of 2022. And if you average a nice $100,000 per year during that 50-year span, you'll still make less money than Mahomes will make over an 8-day span, spanning the first Sunday of that season to the second Sunday of that season. That's how much money he's making.
All right, more feedback, this time from Facebook Live. Paul coming in saying the Lions need to treat Kenny Galladay well, not like Megatron. I think they're still not talking with each other. Yeah, Megatron, he doesn't want anything to do with the Lions unless they pony up some of that money. And, yeah, the Lions ponied up for Megatron at every turn. It was just at the end when he retired, they went after some of his money, and then the Lions stupidly that was a bad PR move by the Lions.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two factors when it comes to Galladay. There's the factor that you and the commenter mentioned, but there's also the Patricia Quinn factor, because as opposed to the Lions kissing the player's ass, the Lions say, you need to kiss our ass. Darius Slay, you're not kissing our ass, you're out of town. Glover Quinn, you're not kissing our ass, you're out of town. You know, all these other players, you're not kissing our ass, you're out of town. So if Kenny Galladay shows any bit of individuality, or if Matt Patricia decides to diss him in public with the rest of his teammates around like he did to Darius Slay, and Kenny Galladay doesn't say, that was right, that was a good idea to diss me and talk about, another man's crank or whatever it is, then the Lions are going to say, you know what, we're happy to trade you away for a conditional 4th-round pick because we love just shipping talent out of town for nothing. And Lions fans will be pissed off at that too.
True.
All right, Dennis, let's turn the page to the 3rd chapter. And in the 3rd chapter, it takes us to the racial awakening and increased racial sensitivity that we have going on in this country right now. Washington's NFL franchise is back in the news, and they have been in the news from time to time for years with people trying to get them to change their name. They've been trying to tell the owner of the team, Daniel Snyder, to pick a different team name, and he has always refused. He has not even said it's under review, it's not up for discussion. He's always refused. I remember a few years ago, during an episode of Saturday Night Live, Chris Rock famously went on Weekend Update and was talking about the Washington Redskins team name being a racist name. And he said, Washington Redskins, that's not nice. That's a racial slur. That's like having the New York N-words. And I just thought that was hilarious. But that was when I really started to think about, wow, calling somebody a Redskin or saying that they're the Redskins, that probably is racist. But even after hearing that, Daniel Snyder did not budge. And as a matter of fact, I can share with you what he said back in 2013 about the possibility of changing the team name. This is from an article on Yahoo Sports, and he says, we'll never change the name. It's that simple. Never. You can use caps. And obviously that reporter did use caps for that article. Never change the name. That's what he said 7 years ago. Then last week happened, and FedEx, one of the team's biggest sponsors, the company that sponsors the team's football field, FedEx Field, requested that the team change its name. Then Nike, the official apparel supplier of the NFL, responded by removing all Washington NFL merchandise from its website. Pepsi and some other big companies joined in. And then on Friday, guess what happens? You got them putting out this statement, and I'll put the statement up for you guys on the screen so you can see. It's a statement that Adam Schefter of ESPN tweeted out, and suddenly they changed their tune, and they're going to go through a thorough review of the team's name, and Adam Schefter adds in his own 2 cents. Let's be clear, there's no review if there's no change coming. Redskins on way out. So that's what's been going on over the last several years and over the last week with regard to that team. But they're not the only team, because on Sunday, baseball's Cleveland Indians stepped into the discussion. Terry Francona, or the Indians announced that they were going to be reviewing their team name, and then Terry Francona, while speaking to members of the fake news media, said this.
I've been thinking about it, and actually thinking about it before we put out that statement. I know in the past, when I've been asked about whether it's our name or the Chief Wahoo, I think I would usually answer and say, I know that we're never trying to be disrespectful. And I still feel that way. But I don't think that's a good enough answer today. I think it's time to move forward and not just say, hey, this is, I don't know. It's a very difficult subject. It's also delicate. And sometimes, like the way I think I leave the American League in errors made in life, which I'm not necessarily proud of. I guess, even at my age, you don't want to be too old to learn or to realize that maybe I've been ignorant of some things and to be ashamed of it and to try to be better.
So that's Terry Francona. He says that he is changed over time. He's not going to put out a comment like he has in the past about, just kind of ducking and dodging around the issue. Dennis, what do you think about these teams reviewing and possibly changing their team names, specifically the Washington Redskins, and I really don't even like saying their name, and the Cleveland Indians?
Yeah, well, it's a time of change. But one thing, this story's all over the map. Just before we came on, I saw the Braves that they don't want the fans to do the tomahawk chop, but they're going to keep their names. The Chiefs, they're considering just staying right where they're at and staying with their names. The one thing about the Redskins, I think it's pretty easy for all of us. I'm not, you don't have to know a Native American or look at polls or anything else. We could look at that. You could see where you could say, wow, you could see why they might want to go ahead and change that name. The one thing I don't like about Nike getting involved here is like they're pretty big hypocrites when you look at their track record and using child labor to make their shoes, and it's just one of those things. That's where it got into Nike uses child labor to make their shoes for 20 cents and sell them for $200, and Kaepernick has got an endorsement for Nike, and NBA. They want to be outspoken on a lot of issues, except when it comes down to China, because they're making $1 billion off of China. So, there's a lot of different things that go into this. But yeah, do I think that the Redskins, this has been going on for as long as I've been alive, talking about changing their name. I think they could do it. I think they should do it. When it comes down to Cleveland, it's like, the Indians, the Chief Wahoo, an exaggerated Indian that's changed over the years. MLB has pulled that off their site. Cleveland, I think it's off their uniforms now, just over the last 2 years. So they've done a little bit that way. They just have a C on their hat. Like, I don't know. When it comes down to the Braves and Indians, I don't know. Like, I'm not jumping in and saying like that's a must. But you know what? I'm open to hear what people have to say about it. But I think the Redskins is the one where you look. But you start looking across. Blackhawks. You can kind of go down the list here of ones that you look at. And you say, you look at a Blackhawk sweater. If somebody told you that they thought that was, that they didn't like their Native Americans, didn't like to be represented by, they're not mascots, they're not cartoon characters. I understand that. I understand that argument.
Yeah, and you could also look at here in the state of Michigan, the Central Michigan Chippewas. Now, I don't see an offensive Chief Wahoo-like figure that you could associate with them. And from what I understand, the Central Michigan Chippewas like being associated with CMU. But when you start talking about the Indians when you start talking about Washington's team name, and people say, well, what's next? What are you going to do next? There's a slippery slope. That's something that would need to be discussed. But I think that odds are you would not need to change that. When I look at Washington's NFL team, I knew that despite what he was saying in 2013, despite the other comments that he's made, that even if it took him dying, Washington was going to change their team name eventually. A lot of people inside and outside of the Native American community found that nickname to be offensive. I still can't believe that it's 2020 and they don't have it. And what I think is really embarrassing, and it should be truly embarrassing for Daniel Snyder, not just that he's buckled the pressure, but that it took money to buckle to the pressure. He didn't care that it might have offended people. He didn't care that it was just judging people based on the color of their skin and saying you're a red skin. But it wasn't until FedEx, a big corporate sponsor, said, hey, we'd like you, or we're requesting you to change your name, that he's saying, oh, maybe I should review this because you could hurt me financially. And then Nike saying, we're not going to sell any jerseys. Oh, wow, that's going to hurt me financially. Now I'll do so. The public outcry meant nothing, but when the sponsor of the stadium and when the official outfitter of the NFL says we're not going to sell any of your merchandise, then all of a sudden Dan Snyder's like, we're going to take a nice review to see how we can be more racially sensitive about this. All he cares about is money. I mean, I guess it's better that than not changing whatsoever, but all he cares about is money. I expect, as Stephen A. Smith said last week, that the team name will be changed before the start of this season.
Yeah, well, that's usually how it works in America, you know. Hit him in the pocketbook, then you get some change.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. For the Indians, though, really the only thing offensive about their team name is that Indians, as they're describing it, as they're trying to celebrate, are Native Americans. Indians, real Indians, are from India. So, like Mahatma Gandhi is an Indian, and he can't relate to the Navajo, the Sioux, the Cherokee, and Native Americans that are native to America. I don't think that a change is necessary. I was okay with the Indians when they got rid of Chief Wahoo. I didn't think that they needed to have him. They finally got rid. I think last year was the first year that they completely took him out of their uniforms, their hats, their jerseys, and all sorts of merchandise. Now, if you want a Chief Wahoo piece of memorabilia, you have to find that on eBay. When it comes to the Chiefs, the Braves, the Blackhawks, I don't find anything offensive to that with that at all. Like when I think of the Michigan State Spartans, are Spartans offensive to Greek people? I would assume they're not. So I don't see why they'd have to go change that whatsoever.
Yeah, you know, the one thing about this, when it comes down to the different protests over the years that I've seen from, you know, Cleveland fans at opening day, or over the years, the different Native American foundations or just the different councils, they always come out with different polls. And, you know, Dan Snyder over the last few years loved, you know, trotting out that one poll that he had from Native Americans, like 90% of them, you know, said that they didn't care that we were called the Redskins. He liked pulling that poll out, in addition to saying, like, you could put it in all caps. But you know what? You could find a poll for everything and every day of the week. Like I found one that completely countered his 90% of all Native Americans. You have that poll, don't you, Chet?
Yeah, I just put it up on the screen so that everybody could see it, and I'll put it right back up there. And the thing that I think, a couple of things that are interesting about this. Number one, the Washington Post is a pretty respected news organization. It's not like, you know, me putting out a Twitter poll. They also interviewed people that classified themselves as Native Americans. So they weren't interviewing whites and blacks and Asians who are saying, oh, they shouldn't be offended. These are actual Native Americans that they were interviewing. And 90% say it didn't bother them. 9% were offended by it. Also, if you look just above that poll, the paragraph says, among the Native Americans reached over a 5-month period ending in April, more than 7 in 10 said they did not feel the word redskin was disrespectful to Indians. An even higher number, 8 in 10, said they would not be offended if a non-native called them that name. Now, that that shocks me because I don't know. I know of one Native American. My cousin is married to a Native American. I can't imagine going up to him and saying, "What's up, Redskin?" or walking into a group of Native Americans and saying that, or I'm saying, "Hey, you're next in line," and someone saying, "Oh, me?" No, not you, the black person, or not you, the white person. You, the Redskin. I can't imagine that would be appropriate to say, "You, the Redskin, come over here."
Yeah, you know what? That's a 2016 poll, and I say they went with over 500 people that they were able to contact the Washington Post from back in 2016. If you Google Redskins, Native American Redskins poll, that is the first story that you'll see on Google. The second one is a story from UC Berkeley, who did a study this year in February, and they found at least half of more than 1,000 Native Americans that they polled were offended by the name Redskins. So there you go. DJ on Facebook Live says, "I really hope they don't make the team the Red Tails. Washington is straight trash and shouldn't share their name with a group of excellent black men." The Tuskegee Airmen, I think, were the Red Tails, and that is one of the names. The Warriors, the Red Tails, some of the names that I've seen that they've put out there. Keith also weighing in, chap, who says FedEx and Nike is causing Washington to lose money. The sponsor, what a joke. Only when you start to lose money do you have to change your name.
And that's exactly the point I was bringing up. Dan Snyder didn't care if some Native Americans were offended, didn't care if some non-Native Americans thought that was offensive. All he cared about was FedEx and Nike talking about, we're going to take some money out of your pocket. I mean, it's not like he's poor, but once they started talking about that, then he cared about it. Like, one thing I think about just looking at that Washington Post poll, let's say that's what you're going to die on and say, well, only 9% are offended by it. Look at all the other team names in the NFL and in team sports. Can you find any team name that's going to offend even 9% of the population? Are 9% of people offended by the name Lions or Patriots, or in other sports, Magic or Pistons or Dodgers or Penguins? No. If they just went the college route and called themselves the Wildcats, nobody would be offended. 0% in a poll would be offended by the name Wildcats.
All right, good enough there. From one story about nicknames being offensive to...
Well, let me put up one more thing.
Oh, you got one more thing?
Yes, I did want to put up one more thing because obviously when there's something like this, a huge story in this country, you can expect a tweet from President Trump. And just yesterday, he responded by saying they named teams out of strength, not weakness. But now the Washington Redskins and Cleveland Indians, two fabled sports franchises, look like they're going to be changing their names in order to be politically correct. Indians, like Elizabeth Warren, must be very angry right now. So obviously President Trump taking the opportunity to not be politically correct, especially with that last sentence.
Yeah, well, hey, you didn't call her Pocahontas, right?
No, he didn't. But he wanted. If he had 290 or 300 characters, I think he would have.
Yeah. Well, now we go to Donald Trump was talking about being politically correct, and somebody who was certainly not politically correct was the wide receiver from the Philadelphia Eagles, DeSean Jackson, who came out and apologized for an anti-Semitic post over the weekend. And this, when it comes down to DeSean Jackson, it might end up costing him his job in the NFL. What do you think?
Yeah, this is, I mean, quoting Hitler is about the easiest way to get roundly criticized in this country. And then to do so on social media. It's one thing if you do so in private conversation where somebody's not holding up a phone to record it. But it's another thing if somebody is holding up a phone, or if you do it on social media where everyone can see what you do. And for those of you that missed it, here's what he did. I'll put up the story from ESPN.com so you can see. On his Instagram story feed, DeSean Jackson featured a quote he attributed to Hitler that said, "White Jews will blackmail America. They will extort America. Their plan for world domination won't work if the Negroes know who they were." He also shared 2 posts on Instagram on Saturday and on Monday expressing admiration for Farrakhan, meaning Louis Farrakhan, whom the Anti-Defamation League and Southern Poverty Law Center have identified as anti-Semitic. Those posts have since been deleted. I mean, you go around quoting anti-Semites, including Adolf Hitler, who cooked Jews in ovens in the Final Solution. You're never going to, outside of in a white nationalist or a KKK rally, you're not going to find much support there. There are a lot of offensive things you can say about Jewish people, but when you start talking about how they control everything and dominating things, that's right on par with talking about Jews being greedy and hungry for money. You just don't do that. And then to put the cherry on top, it's one thing if you do that and your bosses kind of do a wink and a nod and they say, I agree with that. But if your boss, the GM of the team, is a Jew and the owner of the team is a Jew, you could easily get yourself fired. That's not going to fly. So a really dumb statement for a lot of different reasons by DeSean Jackson.
Yeah, and I think the one thing he did try, he put out an apology where he said he was trying to lift up the community. That's an odd way to try to lift up the community, is rolling out some fake Hitler quotes or whatever else and everything else that he mixed up there. So, you know what? If the Eagles are able to be interesting when it comes down to the contract language there, a lot of times, you get that, whatever, it's a good behavior clause or something where you can, nix a contract. If you can do it by putting out something like this, then the Eagles will try to get rid of him, or they might have to eat a lot of that money and end up cutting him. But the one thing about this, and this is something for all the NFL players and the NBA players, and this is one of the things that it's good to use your platform to say, hey, this is where you think something has been wrong, and you reach out. You got Malcolm Jenkins, who when Drew Brees went out and talked about, he doesn't like people disrespecting the flag. He was going on Instagram, he was going on CNN. He was brought to tears. Telling Drew Brees what he needed to do. LeBron James was weighing in. I haven't seen anybody from the NBA saying anything about DeSean Jackson, like, hey, what's up? And you know what? You lose a little bit of credibility. And it's the same thing. Like, I'm glad LeBron weighs in on social injustices and the things that he sees, but does he look like a little bit of a hypocrite because he didn't do anything with China, because he was poised to make hundreds of millions of dollars? And you could say, hey, what does he know about China? This is business. These are the things that he knows. Well, he knows sports and he knows football, and he'll weigh in there. And not that it's, surprising or anything else, but, I don't know, was this some kind of blind spot for, where's Michael Thomas? I mean, he jumped all over Drew Brees like, you better watch out, everything, but none of these guys jumped up and said anything, to DeSean Jackson. You lose some credibility there. It's a bottom line on that. You want people to respect what you're saying about everything coming out there, calling people out on the carpet. Well, start calling other people out on the carpet too. I think a lot of swing and misses by a lot of those guys in the NFL who over the last week, certainly over the last month and a half, had a whole hell of a lot to say on their Twitter accounts. But one of their own guys comes out there, it's like crickets. Bad move by those guys.
That's a fair point, because for the most part we're talking about black athletes, although there have been some more white athletes who have been joining in the cause for Black Lives Matter, or for supporting the end of police brutality and things like that, and they were quick to step up and to check Drew Brees and things like that. But when it came to defending the Jewish community, when it came to chastising DeSean Jackson for his comments, there hasn't been a whole lot of that. And I think that's where the whole need for diversity comes. And people say, well, why do we need diversity and all that stuff? I'm not saying that there needs to be some sort of requirement that every single team needs to have a 3 or 4 Jewish players, but there aren't a whole lot of Jews in professional sports, particularly in football and basketball, at least that I know of. There aren't very many in baseball. I mean, it was a big deal people were talking about Ian Kinsler as a Jew for the Detroit Tigers, and he has a manager who's Jewish as well as Brad Osmus. Hockey, I don't know that there are many Jewish players either, and when you don't have a big Jewish representation, then jokes in the background are laughed at, as opposed to somebody saying, hey, don't offend my community like that. And perhaps some of those players don't know very many Jewish people, and that perhaps the only Jews that they know are their bosses. So I think that it would be helpful if there were some of these athletes that stepped up and checked DeSean Jackson. I will say one thing, though. At least he apologized and did so quickly, and it did seem like it was a fair, a heartfelt apology, but he still said it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say you're trying to uplift the community, to use his words.
Not uplifting Jews.
No, it wasn't. And the thing about all the different guys that were checking Drew Brees and everything, it just goes to, credibility. Like, I'm glad that they're stepping up and they did all of that, and they say they want to understand, their plight. I was like, okay, we're listening. I'm understanding. But then when something like this happens and then there's nothing, it's like, okay, well, what about somebody else's plight? It's just, they missed an opportunity here, like, for others to say, okay, you know what, here he is. Like, these guys are stepping up on a lot of different issues, and here was another one. Malcolm Jenkins played with DeSean Jackson in Philadelphia. I mean, I know he plays with Drew Brees.
Mm-hmm.
He was ready to call Drew Brees out, but he didn't call. I didn't see anything on his IG. I didn't see anything on his Twitter. I didn't see him on CNN. Nothing. Yeah. He could have just said, hey, DeSean, what do you mean? Let's clear this up. Let's get this out there. If you didn't want it, but a little bit surprising on that. But you know what? These guys got some time. And, maybe over these next couple of days, maybe when we're on Thursday, we'll go back and, we'll have a better understanding of where DeSean Jackson was coming from. We'll have a better understanding why Michael Thomas, decided he didn't want to say anything, or Jenkins didn't want to say anything, or LeBron James was concentrating on the bubble. So, he didn't have his phone or something. He wanted to stay on the sidelines for this one. But, we'll see. If they don't say anything, then, they're just going to lose credibility.
And it'll beg the question: what do they think about Jews if they're not going to stand up to support them? But I think in this window of racial sensitivity or racial awakening that we're having right now, where everybody is being exposed and every minority group is being highlighted. First, it was blacks, and I guess that's continuing because it seems like every day or every other day you're hearing about another unarmed black person that was shot, or somebody calling the police on somebody that was black for no reason. And now you move on from that to adding on Native Americans with these team names. Now you've got Jews that are entering the mix because of the DeSean Jackson comments. You can also add in the rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans because people hear coronavirus and then they say, oh no, that's the China virus, and all Chinese people and all Asian people are bringing that over here. So there's been a lot of that, and so it's a time for people to be exposed. Some people are exposing themselves like DeSean Jackson, and it's also a time for people to learn and correct themselves.
Well said, chap. I'm with you on that.
Thank you. All right, do you want to get to some more feedback or head to the fifth chapter?
I'm looking for the feedback here, and when it came down to DeSean Jackson, a lot of Michael Thomases out there. Nobody's saying anything.
Okay. All right, That's
all right. That's all right.
Yeah, let's go to the fifth chapter, and we've got game time, and this Tuesday's game is one of our favorites, although not your favorite, as you get that offensive mug off the screen. It is a game we like to call Spartan, Wolverine, or Buckeye. Now, how do you play Spartan, Wolverine, Buckeye? What is Spartan, Wolverine, Buckeye? Basically, I've got 5 headlines. I'll read the headline to Dennis, and he has to guess if that person is a Spartan, a Wolverine, or a Buckeye, who could be a famous person, like, for instance, Imani Bates. I think it's fair to call him a Spartan now. Or it could be someone who's not famous, like a lesser athlete, like a random student, or just a random fan who lives in one of those communities. We definitely encourage you to play along, see if you can fare better than Dennis. If he gets 3 right, then he is the winner on Spartan, Wolverine, or Buckeye. Dennis, are you ready for your first headline?
I am. I'm going to ask for help right out there. Let's go. Let me see what people like the studio audience back in the day. You're ready, or you're at the stadium. They're putting it up there. I need some help.
All right, first headline. A former college and NFL offensive lineman charged with felony assault of a police officer. Says after police removed the intoxicated man from the bar, he was escorted to a taxi van without incident but couldn't provide his address. Deputies and the taxi driver were trying to determine the address when the former athlete allegedly slammed the van's sliding door on a deputy's arm. Is it a Spartan, a Wolverine, or a Buckeye?
Yeah, well, considering the pandemic here in Michigan, you could only go to the bar for about a minute. I'm going to say, without knowing everything that's going on with, Ohio's protocol, they are, as you'd like to say, in the deep South there in Columbus. I'm going to say that this sounds an awful lot like Ohio State. There's my reasoning. That's why I'm going with Ohio State.
Well, I will say this. These headlines are not necessarily from the past day or week or month or year.
Oh.
Does that change your opinion at all? It may not be from pandemic times.
Well, it feels like it should, because I was so sure of myself that now that would be a real end around that you were playing.
As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, this is pre-pandemic. This is pre-2020.
All right. Well, then I'm going to go with Michigan State.
You think that a Spartan is more likely to rough it up with a police officer?
Yeah. Yes, I do. Yep. MSU.
Well, the answer is Buckeye. You should have stuck with your guns and
That's
your gun
weak.
action.
That was weak.
It's former Ohio State offensive lineman Kirk Barton. He was arrested outside a Bogey Bar and Grill in Dublin, Ohio. He's 6'6", and was removed from the bar for intoxication and for knocking people over. So you're 0 for 1, Dennis. No, I was just giving you some additional information. That's it, to shape your opinion. If it had been a Spartan, you would have thanked me. Second headline: Bleep you chants at stadium concern alumni. Bleep you chants at stadium concern alumni. Were those? Yes, they were coming from the student section. Were those students Spartans, Wolverines, or Buckeyes?
I think I know that. I think it's the Wolverines. I think I remember reading this story. So yeah, I'm locking in U of M here. I didn't like it.
Let me see if this changes your information. A little bit of additional information.
I'm not going with any of your information.
Wait a second.
Changing.
On one occasion, students were chanting it while trainers from the opposing team were attending to an injured player. Spartans, Wolverines, or Buckeyes? Does that change things?
It kind of makes me think of Ohio State, knowing their Philistine fans. That seems like something that would fit into what they would do. But I'm going to stay with Michigan. That's what I thought originally. It felt like it's like I remember the story for a second. I'm going with Michigan.
The answer is Spartans. On that occasion, the students were saying bleep you to a Western Michigan player. This is actually taking place last season. One alum said it really reflected poorly on the school. That's not who we are. Also, after a bleep you chant was heard at the Tulsa game, one alum said that particular chant was the most egregious that we've heard in the 5 years we've been attending, and another alum called it classless and embarrassing. MSU responded with a pretty weak statement saying sportsmanship is a top priority, including positive behavior throughout the stadium. We are continually looking for ways to add additional positive opportunities for fans, specifically students, to participate in and positively impact the game day experience for all. I think a pretty weak response, but saying Michigan, I don't think was that crazy of a guess, because we do know that at Michigan stadiums, when they get a nice third down conversion for the defense and they're about to punt, they say, "You suck," and then within the last couple of years, the students have finished off that "you suck" by adding in Richard, or a synonym for Richard, and a lot of the alums have been offended by that. So you're 0 for 2, Dennis. Third headline, you got to get the final three right to win.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Keith has been helping me out here. He would have been 2 for 2.
Okay. Third headline. Woman slaps the hell out of a fan who spat in her face. The man and woman were fans of the same team. Were the spitter and the slapper Spartans, Wolverines, or Buckeyes?
I don't really, I've never done this before, but I'm going to try it here. Oh, I don't know how to do the rest. S-U.
No, they spell out the name of their state, Ohio.
Oh, is that how it works? Okay,
Yes.
I'm going with the Buckeyes. I mean, who else is going to spit and slap each other?
From the same fan base. Yeah, I don't have any additional hints. That's your final answer?
Oh, yeah.
And you are correct. The answer is Buckeye. There wasn't a whole lot to this story, but in exchange between Ohio State fans, a male fan can be seen spitting in the face of a female fan. She reacted by slapping the spinner in the face, and others in the vicinity reacted as well. So there you go. You're still alive. You're 1 for 3.
I think Justin Fields should be suspended for the last game of the year because of that.
Well, it wasn't a player that did that, but
So what?
just suspend him anyway.
Suspend Olave, too.
Fourth headline. A student arrested...
Master Teague, too. Get him out of there.
Everybody. Fourth headline. A student arrested for allegedly drunkenly punching out the rear windows of cars. Was that student a Spartan, a Wolverine, or a Buckeye?
Look at Keith's. I'm waiting for Keith's response.
He's probably cheating. He's probably Googling all this.
I could. You know what? Maybe that's what I should do. Spartan. It jumped. The Spartan. It's the first thing that came to mind there. Punching out the rear view, a window of a car. That seems like an MSU thing to do.
Well, we do know that
East Lansing.
Yeah, we do know that when Michigan State loses or wins a big game, the fans love to burn couches and tip over cars. So
they do. They're rowdy fan base. Does it say whether they win or lose in this one? It doesn't matter. They're ready to party. Either way,
here's the hint. It was
okay.
This took place during move-in weekend in the fall. So not after a game.
That's MSU. Well, that's when it all happens up at Red Cedar.
Well, you are dead wrong. It was a Wolverine. This happened during the opening weekend of the fall of 2011. A student was drunkenly punching out the rear windows of cars. Dennis, you are a capital L loser, going 1 and 3 in today's edition of Spartan, Wolverine, or Buckeye.
I should have done what I said I was going to do and listen to the viewers here, because Dennis was in on the Wolverine and Keith had the first 3 right. So I'd have already locked this one up.
Well, hopefully everybody out there fared far better than Dennis did today.
Yeah, and if you're somebody that's just tuning in, we do this every Tuesday and Thursday at 8:30. If you subscribe, you go on YouTube and Facebook, they replay these. So it's pretty good to go back, and if you're not catching them live, and if you are catching them live, we read your responses during the show. And Chap, coming up on Thursday, the Ivy League is set to make a big announcement about their fall football plans. We'll see if the other conferences follow their lead like they did in basketball.
I think I know what that's going to be.
Me too. We'll get to that coming up on Thursday's show.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get All right, we're done.